Good morning. My name is Marcia Stromgren, and you've tuned in to Just the Facts. I have as a guest in my studio today Wayne Boucher, who is running for County Commissioner in the 5th District. And if I didn't pronounce his name right, I'm going to have him say it.
It's Wayne Boucher.
Boucher. Good to have you here, Wayne.
Thanks, Marcy.
Wayne is running for commissioner seat, and there's a special election for that on August 13th. So I'd like you to talk about why it is you're running. First of all, I want you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, Wayne, and then to say why you're running for this office of county commissioner.
Well, start off, I'm a little older. I'm 66 years old. I have 43 years of public service behind me. I started as a police officer in the city of Chisholm in 1976. Came to the city of Hermantown as a police officer in 1977 and retired from the Hermantown Police Department around 10 years ago, right after I was elected mayor. I'd also served on the city council for Hermantown for 8 years while I was a city employee. During my time as a public employee, I've done criminal investigations, traffic enforcement. My last 5 years as a police officer were spent as the school resource officer at the Hermantown High School and the Hermantown School District. I also was the past union steward of our police union in Hermantown, which has given me experience negotiating contracts on both sides of the table, both as a union steward and as a management representative on the city council and as mayor. I want to run for county board because I believe we need someone with political experience and government service experience in the county board. Right now, the county needs economic development. We need to grow, we need to expand. And I believe in the last 10 and 18 years in Hermantown, I've done a lot to help Hermantown grow in the same directions that St. Louis County needs to go.
Wayne, I would like you to explain to our audience what a police resource officer is in the school district, because when you were telling me about it the other day, I wasn't aware of what that really entails. Can you give us just a little brief explanation of that?
A school resource officer works in the school district, is employed by the city, but is considered a joint employee of the school district and the city. The job involves basically 1/3 educational resource. When I was a school resource officer, I taught DARE, plus I put on symposiums and things to talk about internet safety, methamphetamine, drugs, home security, and other types of things. Also, a counseling resource to funnel people that need help to the right social service agency or right counseling method. And the other third is enforcement of laws within the school district and investigations of crimes within the school district. But the law enforcement also involves prevention of crimes.
Explain a little bit about prevention of crimes.
Well, something that I did when I was a school resource officer is there were minor misbehavior among students, exhibition driving, smoking, and things like that. And instead of always sending people to court for those violations, I worked with our prosecutor in the city to come up with a field deferral system where people were given a chance to correct their behavior over a certain period of time, and if their behavior was corrected, the charges were basically dismissed or voided. It brought kids into compliance with the rules, regulations, and laws without putting things on their criminal record.
Certainly some of that is the duty of the St. Louis County Board to rule over if programs like that are offered through the county, and I'm not sure if they are or are not, but I know we have prosecutors for the city, and I know we have prosecutors for the county. So would some of that type of program be applicable, or is it now being applied to minor offenses?
I'm not sure the specific programs that each school and each resource officer is using, but the county does have, as of the beginning of this school year, 3 full-time school resource officers that cover 4 schools in the St. Louis County Rural School District.
Okay. So are some of the techniques that you used in Hermantown being applied through those resource officers that are actually working to prevent young people from becoming a prison pipeline type of thing?
Well, the basic premise of 1/3 education, 1/3 counseling resource, and 1/3 enforcement is used by almost all school resource officers. Okay. The individual specifics of how that's done is something that's worked out within the jurisdictions, and they should be locally approved and locally effective.
Okay, and as a county commissioner, you each have to take different areas of, well, not expertise, but different areas where you feel you could be effective. And that would be possibly something that you might oversee should you be elected on August 13th.
That could be. Right now, those duties are assigned to another commissioner since that seat is empty.
Okay.
And it depends on the whole commission on who was assigned what duties.
Okay.
I'm very interested in criminal justice and corrections, but I'm also interested in transportation and infrastructure. A third area that I'm interested in is labor relations.
Infrastructure. Let's talk a little bit about that. How well is the county doing? I know they've got more dollars now for roads and whatnot because of the village tax, but how well are they doing? Could there be some improvement as far as road conditions go?
There's always room for improvement. The county has a unique circumstance in that our roads don't last as long as other areas of the state due to the topography and the water in the soil that's constantly causing potholes and upheavals. So they have to be engineered in a lot more complicated way. There are roads, a lot of our rural highways are in very good condition, but they need to be kept that way. Our bridges need to be kept up. Also, something that goes along with infrastructure, and it isn't normally considered, is rural broadband. That's a great necessity for rural St. Louis County right now. We have a very large concentration of entrepreneurial types in rural St. Louis County. We have home-based businesses. We have small business operators. We also have rural farmers, and these people all need to be competitive to succeed. And rural broadband is something that's actually caused people to be behind the curve when it comes to being competitive. I hear stories of students whose parents have to drive them 7 miles to a hotspot so that they can do their homework. You know, there are things like that that need to be spread about rural St. Louis County.
And I can't disagree with you because I live in a rural area and we have, for my cell phone, it's sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And our township, Normanna Township, has been discussing this broadband issue for the last, 4 or 5 years now, and we have gotten nowhere with it. And you know, we don't get cable in the country because, well, they put up the lines for it and they never followed through on it, and so that isn't even going to be. I think that's going to be a thing of the past anyway. But we don't have good cable network. Service out there, no matter what part of the township we're living in. And people are constantly complaining, but what can the township people do unless some way or another, the lines are already in the ground, the fiber optics are in the ground, but there's no connection to it whatsoever.
Well, ideally, it would be nice if the federal government were able to get involved in the same manner as the REA back 100 years ago, as far as pushing this to rural areas. Right now, it's being driven by demand. It's being driven by population density, and the companies that do this go where the most profit is.
Sure.
And they're not willing to go further, and it does cause them to lose money when they do. Government intervention is needed, stimulation is needed, but it's needed to make sure that the service that's provided meets the quality that's advertised.
Well, we only have one service provider, and I haven't been very happy with their services since the other ones were kind of pushed out of the business. So I hope that we get something in the near future for everybody that's concerned, or maybe everyone that has a need. So, okay, let's talk a bit about working with law enforcement, that you said was one of your interests. What do you see there as probably the greatest need?
I think, again, people in the rural areas need to feel safe and secure in their homes. They need to feel safe when they leave their homes. Rural St. Louis County, and that includes Proctor, Hermantown, and Rice Lake, are tremendously susceptible to daytime burglaries when both wage earners are away, especially during the school year when children aren't home. They've always been susceptible to that. Daytime patrols should be a little more prevalent. I would like to see the Sheriff's Department do that, but they need the funding to do that. Also, the help that the Sheriff's Department provides small local police departments could be increased. There are areas of expertise that the Sheriff's Department could lead in, and that's the crime scene investigations and photography, the criminalistics and the statistics end of things.
I know that when I was on the township board, I got off in 2009. I was on there for, I don't know, I think it was 9 years actually. We and many of the other surrounding communities disbanded our police departments because there was some corruption going on. There wasn't good oversight over what they were doing. We have a great fire department. Most of the rural township areas have phenomenal fire departments, the volunteer fire departments, but there's virtually no local police departments in those that I'm aware of around our area. That's all the sheriff's office that has to take care of those calls. And I hardly see a sheriff's car, and I'm in and out of my home, my residential area all the time, and I rarely see a sheriff's car going around.
Well, the township police system evolved from a system of elected constables back in the 70s. That changed with peace officer licensing in 1978 and 79, and all of these peace officers needed to be licensed and trained. It was very expensive for townships to send their officers to school for a part-time job, for maybe 8 or 16 hours a week. They also had to keep records for these police officers, and the record retention expenses were tremendous. They drove most of the townships out of the local police business. There was a move in the middle to convert these officers from elected officials to appointed officials, which kept the same licensed certified officers working for a few years later, but it generally became so expensive that townships couldn't afford the regulations that went along with it. And the problem the Sheriff's Department has is, again, like rural broadband, it's supply, demand, and population density. It's hard to be present when crimes are committed when there's not a lot of people around. Rural areas are very, very sparse as far as population density. And it's hard for the Sheriff's Department to tailor their patrol to that. We need to look for some other innovations to do that. Community watches, identify people that are home during the day that can look at their neighbor's house once in a while. There are some things that can be done.
That would be something that I would encourage my township officials to look into, community watches. I think that's an excellent idea, but like you say, a lot of people, they're not home anymore because most parents have 2 jobs, and of course the kids are in school. So very few of us so-called retirees that are around more often. So.
Well, you don't need a licensed peace officer to be a witness.
Right.
To be someone who reports crimes.
Okay. Well, like I say, I'll have our township look into that. I think that's a good suggestion. What are some of the issues that you see that the Health and Human Services Department in the county are looking at, and ways that perhaps we could reduce that budget, because that budget has steadily increased to the point where it is a major cost factor of county expenses?
Well, one of the things to remember, though, is even though the budget is tremendously huge, about 8% of it is paid for with county taxes and county funds. The rest of it is passed through from the state of Minnesota for obligations that the county needs to do. I think we need to continue to look for efficiencies in delivery. How do we deliver this service in the most economical way? There are now times where people are visiting their doctor by Skype or by internet, which of course means rural broadband. But there are there are innovations that can happen to reduce costs and still keep people served properly. But the bulk of the expenses are passed through from the state of Minnesota, but also the requirements are made by the state of Minnesota.
Have you had some suggestions as to how that could be implemented, what you're talking about?
You know, I am not on the county board. I am not part of the system. I have examples of government and how things have worked in the city of Hermantown, and I hope to bring those examples to the county board if elected. But I want to look for specific opportunities to achieve efficiencies. When I was first elected a city councilor in Hermantown almost 19 years ago, I had all kinds of grand plans and ideas and schemes, and we're going to implement this and we're going to implement that. And one of my thoughts was, could we reorganize city government based on how would we build our service model if we were just inventing this city today? Well, I quickly realized that that couldn't be done. First of all, we have long-term obligations in departments and employees, and I have to have the cooperation of a couple other people to get that done, to get those things accomplished. Instead, what I've looked for is opportunities to change. We've had opportunities where department heads have changed, and we've instituted a new department head that met slightly different qualifications. One of them was our city administrator. Our first city administrator was a very good person with finances, but he lost touch a little bit with human resources. So when we replaced him, we looked for someone with human resource experience. Now with that experience, we have a very good employee-employer relationship. We have a very calm workplace where employees feel valued. That's an example of the opportunities to look for to increase efficiencies.
Okay. What are some of your, when I talk to you, you have quite a bit of knowledge. You've also been own now or did own a business.
Yes, I do.
Correct?
Yes.
So you bring that aspect into your experience as a person who's running for this office. You would think in a business sense, like most business owners do. They don't go out and, the government is different. It spends the money because it's somebody else's money, but as a business owner, you control how much you're spending to keep your business going. How would you apply that to county government?
Well, my background first is I have an education with a business degree with a finance concentration from the University of Wisconsin Superior. I earned that while I was working full-time as a police officer and graduated with honors in 1991, a full 20 years after I graduated from high school. I started my business in 1994 or 1995 selling used cars. Now, I'm not doing terribly well because I've spent more time being mayor and being a city councilor than I've been able to put into my business. But we need to operate government with a lot of business principles. Some things that have changed since I've been involved in government is we now use depreciation in government to depreciate our equipment and our vehicles. In the beginning, it was, well, why do we use depreciation? That's a tax benefit. It is more than that. It assesses the useful life of a thing, whether it's a sewer line, a water tower, a police car, or a fire truck. It plans for the eventual replacement. And we can budget for that if we do it slowly. We know that in 18 years we're going to need to replace this piece of equipment. So we can budget for that. In Hermantown, we've done that with our sewer and water funds. We build in 80% of the cost of depreciation every year into the sewer and water bills so that when it comes time to replace that equipment, we have the money. We have it in an enterprise fund, sitting, earning interest, waiting for new sewer lines to be needed, sewer lines to be replaced, and water lines to be replaced, water towers, pumps, things like that. So that's a business principle that's been transferred to government. We also need to transfer something in government, and that's accountability of our administration, accountability of our elected officials, and accountability of our employees. It's something that I've experienced has always been present in Hermantown. But I came to Hermantown from other areas of government where that wasn't as prevalent. When I started with the Hermantown Police Department, we were very understaffed. I was the third full-time officer hired in a city that actually needed 6 or 7 full-time police officers at the time. But we were given the charge from our chief of police that it's your responsibility if a call comes in to complete that, to carry it all the way through to either resolution or prosecution in court. I didn't have that in the department I came from. We did our reports, we turned them over to an investigator, and that person handled it. So there was a sense of responsibility. Also, in city government, I have tried to impress all of our employees with, you have the responsibility to do this job. Stretch yourself so much that you start to make small mistakes that we can talk about and correct. Own this enough that you stretch yourself.
And how has that worked?
That's worked very well. We have we only have a little over 30 full-time employees in Hermantown, and we do a whole lot of work with those people. But they're not abused. They don't work past their quitting time, but they're very, very responsible for their jobs. But it's a new system that's only been in place since 1976. It's a new way of doing things in government.
Well, they're used to it by now, though.
Yeah.
And so they feel comfortable for the most part. I would
It's
hope
gone forward.
that's something that sounds like it could be implemented in the county and the city.
It could
and
be, but things like that do take time to
Surely.
implement, especially in converting an old system that has compartments. We don't want to call, I don't call them departments because that's the organizational structure. But there is institutionalized thinking that can be changed over time.
Well, I would hope that that could be implemented in the county, because I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that talk about the waste and inefficiency, and of course I've seen it in city government. And when my husband was in construction, small business, his own business, and trying to get a permit for a small porch was not on turnover in a few hours. It was several days worth, and it's holding up the progress of anybody that owns a business when you have to come in and get a permit for something small and you can't get it for several days. So it seems to me that we need to implement those kinds of ideas. Is this something that evolved through your leadership? Obviously not, because you weren't in office as a mayor since 1976, but is that an idea that had been started prior to you, and then you just fine-tuned it throughout the years that you've been as a mayor, or how has that happened?
It's an idea that was brought up by longtime Chief Terry Alshafer of the police department. And he told all of his employees that I don't care what you're doing as long as you're working hard. And if you're working hard, I will support you. And he also told us that there's nothing that happens in this city limits that's not your responsibility. You will go out of your way to stretch yourself to make everything right for the people that live here.
Have you had any feedback as to how the public sees the office?
What it brought to me is a philosophy of, we are not just employees when we work for government. We are servants of the public. We serve the public with their consent. They're not just our customers, they're our shareholders. And our success in what we do depends on their opinion of our services.
I can't say I've heard this before, so it's rather not startling, but interesting.
Well, I believe in a concept of servant leadership, which is an upside-down pyramid.
Well, and that's exactly what elected officials are supposed to be thinking. They aren't there to collect their check. They're there to serve the public to the best of their ability.
Well, there are different types of leadership models, and this is the one that I embrace.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. It sounds, not that I'm interested in moving over to Hermantown, but
Please do.
I think, well, I would like to see that implemented even in our own township. The one thing that's nice about townships is it's the closest government to the people. And we are accountable to them every March, and very few even come, but they have a right to come and say what they want to see happen for the next year, and the township officials have to take into consideration what they say and implement it to the best of their ability. And our township is moving along just fine. We don't have businesses, we don't have, except small business, and we don't have industry of any kind. We don't have schools, and we don't even have a church out there. So we're a pretty unusual community as far as that goes. There's not a lot to oversee except our fire department. So,
But you're still able to determine your destiny as a group, as a township.
right,
And that's important.
right.
Self-determination by a community is very important.
Yeah, I think we have too much interference by government mandating this, mandating that, and so it's nice to still be in an area that isn't so overloaded with that.
Well, living and working in a system, as an example, Hermantown, that's grown from nothing on December 31st of 1975 to what it is today, there are a lot of times where government needs to just get out of the way.
And I would agree heartily on that. I remember as a young person living in Piedmont Heights, my friend and I took a walk one day, and we were in the farmland of Hermantown before you knew it. It was 6 miles one way, and then we had to barely limp home. I think we finally got a ride towards the end of it, but I remember it being very rural. And visiting a cousin out there by the old school, and it was just rural, very rural. So, okay. Do you have anything you'd like to wrap up your message for the public?
Yes. The biggest thing I see as a need for St. Louis County is economic growth. We need business, we need industry, we need real jobs that pay living wages. We need to grow so that the burden of property taxes is not shared solely by the homeowner. In Hermantown, we've increased business value, we've increased property value, which has softened tax increases that were needed for increase in service. In Hermantown, we have grown from a point of providing no service to providing what's provided today, which is less than a lot of other cities. But we've done it with the acceptance of the residents or the consent. Part of that has been that property values have increased so that the value of Hermantown is over $1 billion today. That has softened the blow for homeowners when new services were needed or services needed to be expanded. So when a budget goes up 4%, but your property values have risen 2%, that means the impact on the property owner is less, the dollar number. And also, we have the lowest, among the lowest, city taxes in St. Louis County. At one time, we were the second lowest. The only one lower was Iron Junction, and they have no services. So we've done that. This year, we have roughly a $6 million budget. Comparatively, a city with 1,000 less people, the city of Virginia, has about a $17 million budget. They have long-term obligations and services. They're a nuclear city. They have transportation obligations. They have community recreational obligations. They have a full-time fire department. They have a full-time ambulance crew. They have a city hospital that they still subsidize, even though it's run by someone else. So they have those long obligations that we don't have as a community, but we haven't gotten into that. There may be some day where the citizens of Hermantown want those services, and then cost has to go up. But if the value of the property, if the business is there, value keeps going up, the impact is softened. And I'd like to spread that throughout St. Louis County. I'd like to see St. Louis County be able to grow to the population we had in 1979 of 220,000 people instead of its current 199,000 people.
We dropped that much. Oof. Wow.
So,
That's a big,
but to
big
do
difference.
that, we need industry, we need jobs. We need to promote the resources of St. Louis County. And the resources aren't just mining, although those are tremendous. Some of the resources are our people. We've got a great bunch of entrepreneurial and hardworking people in St. Louis County. We need to assist them in growing. A lot of those are in the rural areas. We need to work with our smaller cities for economic development. we need to grow the county. My experience of growing Hermantown, I believe, will translate well into service as a county commissioner.
I think that sounds exciting, so I hope that you are successful on November 13th. And this is an obligation for those people watching and everyone in St. Louis County. Remember, you have an opportunity to vote August 13th for one county commissioner seat. And I encourage you to get out and vote.
And those are the residents of Proctor, Hermantown, Rice Lake, Midway, Solway, Breveter, Kenosha, Geneson, Lakewood, and Duluth townships.
Unfortunately, we're not included in there. Thanks for coming in, Wayne.
Thank you.